It has been 2 weeks since the release of that massive grand jury report in Pennsylvania that named more than 300 priests who had sexually abused more than 1,000 children.
And there is a woman in our area who watched the release of that report with a mixture of shock and hope. She was sexually abused by a priest and even says that she was taken by that priest to see the body of a teacher who knew about the abuse. In the 1990s, she sued the Archdiocese of Baltimore under the name of Jane Doe. The lawsuit was thrown out, but then last year, Jane Doe surfaced again. This time we all watched the Netflix series The Keepers. Jean Hargadon Wehner named the disgraced priest Joseph Maskell as her abuser. And when she attended Archbishop Keough High School back in the late 60s, and for the first time since the release of The Keepers, she has granted an on-camera interview. WMAR-2 News' Christian Schaefer has her story tonight.
Sexual abuse has been talked about before, but never in the way Jean Hargadon Wehner did in The Keepers, using many words and phrases we can't repeat on broadcast television. She took viewers inside the office at Archbishop Keough High School, where in the late 1960s, Father Joseph Maskell raped her dozens of times and even invited other men, she says, priests, politicians, and police officers, to rape her as well. When Hargadon Wehner came forward in the 1990s as Jane Doe, she had spoken with members of her family about what happened to her. Another 20 years after that, talking to a worldwide audience about being sexually abused was not going to be easy.
I also know that I did things I still carry a lot of shame for. And I have no idea who would look at me and say, I remember you in that room.
But Hargadon Wehner says she trusted the producer of The Keepers, Ryan White, who we interviewed last year.
The least we can do is immerse ourselves in this darkness for a few years. That's not asking too much. It took us 3 years to document it. Hear these people, hear their truth, and relay it to the world so that it doesn't happen again.
Now, she says, the reaction to the series has been overwhelmingly positive.
They were touched by it. It's a wonderful thing. I am more grounded now after a year to be able to say, you know, it's done what I hoped.
Which is that more victims would come forward and get help.
What the final, product was, I could not have hoped for more.
But she also hoped for change within the Baltimore Archdiocese and the wider Catholic Church, which she no longer considers herself a part of.
I'm a very hopeful person, but I have not been able to hope that something will happen here in Maryland around the crime, the criminal behavior that the children were put through.
Then came the recent news out of Pennsylvania. For the past 2 years, a grand jury had been investigating 6 Catholic dioceses.
Priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them not only did nothing, they hid it all.
A massive report uncovering decades of abuse, naming more than 300 priests, more than 1,000 victims, and the bishops who hid it all.
The time of telling these victims to keep their truth to themselves has ended.
For Jean, that time ended a long time ago, but in the 90s, her experience involved lawyers, depositions, and eventually a Baltimore City Circuit Court judge refusing to allow her lawsuit against the Archdiocese of Baltimore to go forward. All, she believes, a church and state-run effort to tell her to keep her truth to herself.
They wanted everyone to just go back to sleep. And that's the silence. That's the icing over what is, I believe, still going on and what did go on.
The grand jury investigation happened in Pennsylvania. You'd clearly like to see one here, but are you confident that it will ever happen here?
I pray that something similar happens here.
What the Pennsylvania report showed her was that records do exist of abuse and of the hiding of that abuse. Hargadon Wehner believes if a similar investigation happened in Maryland, it would uncover not just more of the same, but worse.
In Maryland, they will find the raping of the children, but they will also find a criminal network that was being covered up by a variety of institutions, and one was the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and that's my personal opinion.
A spokesman for the Archdiocese of Baltimore said the Archdiocese would cooperate with any law enforcement effort to hold abusers accountable, but added that the disclosure of the names and information about dozens of priests back in 2002 is something that those dioceses in Pennsylvania had not done, and that contributed to a push for a grand jury probe there. Jean Hargadon Wehner also believes the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse claims should be removed, which would allow people of any age to report abuse that happened when they were children. There is a website with much more information about what's happened since that series came out. It's called The Keeper's Impact. We have a link to that on our website, WMAR2news.com.